In this video, I'm going to cover what redundancy is, how it works, some of your rights, some places to go for help, and some tips for the last day of work, all in 5 minutes or less. Anything I say here is not legal or financial advice. It's not a pleasant topic, but something that being educated about can make a big difference in. There will be certain aspects that are specific to you, your contract of employment, and the employer. Therefore, this is an overview of the situation. So what is redundancy? Redundancy is a form of dismissal from your job, and it happens when employers need to reduce their workforce. It could be the case that an entire section of a company is no longer needed, and that job roles become redundant. There is a process for employers to follow to make an employee redundant. This is a summary from the government lead charity Money Helper. If you're faced with redundancy, your employer must treat you fairly and act according to your contract and legal redundancy rights. That includes making sure that you're consulted, following the right selection process, and giving you a proper notice period. If not, you could have a claim for unfair dismissal or claim compensation for lack of consultation. Let's break that down into chunks and work on it. First up is selection. The selection process needs to be fair, based on competency, experience, capability, and not things like age, race, gender, or if you're disabled or pregnant. If your job role is selected to be made redundant, then it should have been selected fairly and explain to you why it was selected. If you believe you have been selected unfairly, then this may be classified as unfair dismissal. Then you can usually appeal the decision. Next is notice. If you are selected, then you have rights to a notice period. This is the time between your employer's statement of redundancy and your last working day. If you've worked there for at least 1 month, then you get at least 1 week's notice. If you have worked there for more than 2 years, then you get a week's notice for each year that you have been there, up to a maximum of 12 weeks at 12 years of employment or more. It's possible for an employer to pay in lieu of notice, which will be offered as a lump sum payment instead of working your notice period. This payment is taxed as per your normal wage. Alternatively, you could go through a period known as garden leave. This is where you are still considered employed and have to follow the terms of your contract, but you do not have to go into work. You will need to be available to be called in if you are needed, and you're not able to start a new job. Finally, your employer may offer you something known as a compromise agreement. This is a payment for giving up your rights and agreeing not to go to an employer's tribunal. Your employer should pay for you to get independent legal advice to understand the rights you would be giving up. Next up is payment. There is a statutory redundancy pay provided you have worked for your employer for at least 2 years. This payment system caps at 20 years of employment and varies by age. You receive half a week's pay for each full year of employment you were under 22. 1 week's pay for each full year where you were 22 to 41, and 1.5 weeks pay for each full year you were 41 years or older. The weekly payment is calculated as the average amount you earn per week in the 12 weeks leading up to your redundancy notice. There is a maximum amount of statutory redundancy pay, which was increased in April 2021 and is now capped at £544 as the weekly payment and £16,320 for the total payment. Redundancy pay, including any severance pay under £30,000, is not taxable. You are not eligible for statutory redundancy if you're in the armed forces, police, or crown servants. If your employer keeps you on or you refuse an alternative they have suggested without good reason, you will also lose your right to statutory redundancy pay. There are some other exceptions. You can find those details on the gov.uk website linked in the description. Finally, additional information. If you've been employed for at least 2 years, you can request time off to look for another job or to receive training to get another job. Your employer is responsible to pay at least 40% of 1 week's pay for this. If you find another job, you can request to leave early. It is possible to maintain your redundancy pay, but this is subject to your employer's agreement, so it's worth discussing with them. A little bit of housekeeping. Some things to consider before leaving your workplace for the last time. Try to get the details of your pension, job references from your employer, your P45, go over the details of payments, wages, any other money you may be owed, and check that you have received everything due. If you need help with this, there are services out there to provide information or support for people going through or facing redundancy. Some of these you will find linked below in the description. Remember, a lot of this is subject to your contract of employment and personal circumstances. None of it should be considered financial or legal advice. Seek professional assistance if you feel it's required, but I hope you have found this video useful. Subscribe to see more financial education from me, and until the next one, bye!